Who wants to see this happen to America? Who wants to? Because, you know, a lot of times when you think about this stuff, you think about proxy wars. You think about how some of these countries are sitting there saying, listen, the way I'm going to get to America is by pinning XYZ against them. So they're playing those games. But who would like to see America's way of living, capitalism, all of that fall? Who would love to see that happen?
You're a good interviewer. Really, these are great questions. My friend Faisal Al-Muhtar, who heads Ideas Beyond Borders, he's an Iraqi refugee who's come to this country. He's an amazing human being. He was telling me, spending time with him was like dog years. It's like 7 to 1. He was telling me that that many places in the Middle East, primarily funded by China and Russia, have stations dedicated to BLM, dedicated to the divisive madness that's currently overtaking. So basically the enemies of the United States want to see this succeed. They want to see these rebellions succeed. Meanwhile, there are people there are countries who are literally putting their own citizens in concentration camps, and you don't hear a peep about it from these folks. When, you know, you'll hear about a gender imbalance at a conference, but when ISIS takes literal slaves, and we know that, we have the videos from the slave bazaars when they take Yazidi women, there's not a peep, there's not a protest, there's nothing. You don't hear anything about it. So to answer your question directly, there are countries like Russia and China and Iran to a certain extent who are directly funding the BLM, and the accoutrements are the kind of the conceptual drivers for this. And then you have the people on the far left, the woke far left in particular, who really want to see the end to what they consider to be an oppressive patriarchal regime.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. By the way, going back to your book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. So when you're dealing in an environment, in a climate where 99% is giving to one party and 1% is given to the opposing party, how do you have those difficult, those impossible conversations with people from the opposite aisle? I mean, how do you have those conversations?
Yeah, that's another really good question. It's actually really easy to have those questions. When I taught in prisons, I did my dissertation and I taught prison inmates how to think through moral questions. And I pulled from the history of Western philosophy, you know, questions like, what does it mean to be, what is justice? And geez, so many questions, you know, can you be unjust towards yourself? And what does it mean to be a good man? When people will talk to you already, even if you think the gulf or the divide is so great, the moment someone's talking to you, that's great. Those conversations are far more possible than you think, far more possible. The problem is when they won't talk to you. And that's the situation which we have now. The folks who participate in this ideology, they don't buy into the norms of civil society. They don't buy into reason, discourse, evidence. And this is really important for your audience to understand. So if let's say that you and I want to figure out a problem. Let's say we want to figure out, you know, we've heard from Armenians, for example, and Armenians are claiming that they're pulled over by the police at radically disproportionate rates than non-Armenians. You and I would sit down and would say, all right, man, we got to figure this out. How are we going to do this? And we'd say, okay, well, we're going to look at the body cams of people. We're going to, every time someone calls in, we're going to see if they have an IAN or the YAN, which anybody doesn't know, it's an Armenian last name.
Yep.
And then we're gonna kind of study this somehow. We're gonna figure out, you know, we're gonna do a survey data, whatever, however we're gonna do it. Okay, that's how sane, rational people go about figuring stuff out. These folks don't buy the traditional tools that we would use to solve problems: reason, evidence, epistemic adequacy, which basically means, you know, knowing what you're talking about. What they would do is, so they believe, this Aubrey Lloyd's, the master's tools cannot disable the master's house. The master's house is the current system we have, and it's patriarchy, racism, oppression. So what built this is their thinking. Like, what built the system? Well, evidence, reason, you know, science to a certain extent. All of these things. So you can't disable the patriarchy. You can't disassemble it through evidence and reason. You have to use something else. Like, you have to rip down statues. You have to tear stuff down. You have to whatever the particular brand of lunacy is. You have to defund the police. You have to make it so that the system in place is disabled.
So if you like this little short clip from an interview I did, click over here to watch the entire interview. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.